Well, good morning, or good afternoon to everybody. I am going to spend probably 45 minutes walking through the Dynamics GP 2015 new features. Looking forward to the questions, but I think we've got some nice usability features that we get to talk about. So with that, we'll go ahead and start and talk about what is new with Microsoft Dynamics GP 2015. So Dynamics GP 2015 was released back in December of 2014, and we are anticipating a service pack release. If I can get my, there we go. It's going to take its time. If we could, too many clicks there. Sorry about that. We are expecting R2 of GP 2015 to be released in June, and that will have additional features beyond what I am able to show you today. So our agenda is to walk through the big rocks. What did they release? What's cool? What's new? And so we're going to talk through system features, which deals with further integration between the Dynamics GP client and Management Reporter, some usability setup settings to help you copy new users into GP, how the web client has changed. So the web client was released with GP 2013, and they have been adding features and options to it all along for the last 18 months. We're going to talk about business intelligence. Let's see what is new with the Business Analyzer and why you might want to consider using that tool, as well as how they're enhancing the Smart List Designer tool that they released with GP 2013. With the financials aspect, we're going to talk intercompany, the new terms code, talk about how fixed assets has been improved, and as well with distribution, how they're enhancing the email functionality. And one big rock that's not necessarily shown on this screen is the workflow module, and we'll talk about what they released with 2013 and what they've released with 2015 and how you'd be able to use that. So let's go ahead and take a look at those system-wide, what these look like. So in the system-wide features, what they added was the ability to copy the home page and the area page. So when you set up a new user, you can copy the user security setting from somebody, and you can also copy the area page from another user. It makes it easier, faster to set up those new users within Dynamics GP. They also added a navigation list that will link you to your Management Reporter reports. So from within the Dynamics GP user interface, you can go to a navigation list off of your financials tool and pull up Management Reporter reports. You're able to view them, run them, edit them, create them, depending on what your role is within Management Reporter. They also added with GP 2015 a tighter integration to set up companies. So in your company setup, there's going to be some checkboxes right at the bottom here that says Enable the interface. This is what starts the creation of your data mart in Management Reporter. So it's saying either create the GL portion, or if I'm using analytical accounting, create that analytical integration. So let's go take a look at what the navigation lists look like and how to copy a home page setting. So I've navigated back to Dynamics GP 2015, and we're going to talk about how the user setup, the copy feature would look. So I'm going to go ahead and click on my shortcuts pane to my user setup window. And in the user setting here, we can select our user. So if we've created a user and given them access to companies and everything, now we're going to go ahead and say copy the settings. So this is my new user. I can click on the Copy Settings button, and in this Copy Settings button, I can select whose security am I going to select, and as well, am I going to copy home page roles, content, or area pages, and from which user. So it can be two separate users, depending on how this new user wants to be set up within the Dynamics GP system. So I can just select users, and then I could click on the OK button. In this case, we won't do that. But nice settings. So we talked about how Management Reporter can now be interfaced within the GP user client. So if I click on the navigation pane to Financials, and then go over to my list, I have a new option here that says Management Reporter Reports. If I click on that, it will list out all of the reports that I have access to that are deployed out in Management Reporter. So I don't have that many. But what it will allow me to do now is I could take this particular report, highlight it, mark it, and also say, hey, you know what, open it up, run it, let me see what's going on here. So if I click on, we'll hope this one works. I clicked on the report. It's launching into my Management Reporter web view. And so now as a user from the Dynamics GP interface, I didn't have to go anyplace else. I'm able to come into this report. I could do any drill downs that I have available to me. I also have a refresh button, so it'll go back out, refresh this report with these dates if I chose to. So now if anybody's currently on GP 2015 and they say, I don't have that option here, it's really it's a setup option. So under the administration option and your company setup, we've had this report setting, excuse me, might be under system here. Your reporting tool setup window, and this window has been here for several versions. And it is where we can deploy out the SQL Server reports or the Excel-based reports. And there's a new tab on this window that says deploy out your Management Reporter reports. And from there, you're deploying out your where to find your Management Reporter service and where your executable is. So that takes care of what the copy homepage and the navigation list for Management Reporter looks like. The web client. So the web client has been, more and more folks are starting to use the web client. It is, it's the ability to deploy out Dynamics GP on either an internal web site, or you can have it externally facing as well if you choose to. And when they released the module early in GP 2013 land, it did not have all of the modules available, like manufacturing or payroll and human resources were not available on the web client. Those features have been added, and with GP 2015, they added on the ability to use the web client with the invoicing module as well as Canadian payroll. Now, for the fun of it, we'll show you what, and that's Canadian payroll. And we're going to go ahead and show you what that web client looks like. So I've got my web client up and running, and if you'll notice that home page that I'm going to when I'm on the web client looks very similar to what I've got when I'm in my standard client install. But from this screen, I can click on my navigation options to go to sales. I have the same area pages as I have in the Rich client, and then I can click on the invoice entry. So this invoicing module, this is a tool set that is available now on the web client that wasn't previously available. So business intelligence is a big word. It talks about our way of gathering information, pulling into reports or graphs or methodologies of giving people dispersing information about our ERP system, maybe about our operational system. And Microsoft continues to make advancements in their internal tools and how we as accountants can use this information. So they released a product called Smart List Designer. And what this is an enhancement to the Smart List tool that comes with the product. Smart List Designer allows us to create or modify existing Smart List views. So it's not the E1 Smart List Builder tool. It's the internal GP Smart List Designer tool that we're going to be talking about. So they're adding more and more functionality. So we can still combine tables, we can link tables, we can create calculations. But what they did this with GP 2015 and said, you know what, we're going to create a tighter integration between Smart List Designer and Excel. Because what people wanted to do is create those Excel reports or those refreshable Excel spreadsheets. And we weren't able to with the first release of it. Now what they've done is they've allowed us to create Smart List Designer objects using SQL queries that we can publish out to our refreshable Excel spreadsheets. we'll go ahead and take a peek at that one. So our Smart List tool, we can still navigate it to the same way that we always have. And we are able to take a look at our Smart List. I have access to New button here. And I'm going to go ahead and click on the Financial folder, and I'm going to click on this Query folder, because this is one I created. What they've done is they have said you can create a new Smart List query. And if you use a SQL view, so when I scroll down in this window, I'm looking at all the dictionaries that are available to me with Microsoft Dynamics. And then I've got a folder that holds all of my SQL views. And the ones that you're seeing here, are the out-of-the-box or the SQL views that come with Dynamics GP. But you can create your own views, put them into a shared location, and then use those views to create your Smart List Designer object. If you create a Smart List Designer object that uses a view, such as the one I've got, we'll be able to publish this out as an Excel report. So in the Smart List Designer, I select my view, my fields. I can create a relationship with another table. I have the ability to create a calculation if I wanted to. And even from this window, I can go ahead and I can see the results of this query. So I can say, based off of what I'm pulling in the chart of accounts. You also have the ability to see what that SQL statement looks like. So the Smart List Designer, I can create a new view. Discard those changes. I can create a new view. I used it using a SQL view. So this particular transaction, it brings up data in my Smart List window. But now what I've got is a button here that says Publish. And it's available to me because I used a SQL view to create this. If I click on this button, it will ask me. It's going to say I'm going to replace this. But basically it says, do you want to create the Excel report? And you say yes. And it publishes it automatically for you. Now, it publishes the Excel report in the same location that you told when you install the original SQL report or the Excel report, to put it in the same location that you told it to put it in here. So now if I go to Data Connections and to the company that I'm logged in as and my folder, I have my to query. That's the name of my company and the query that I built, and it's been refreshed on this day. So if I go in and I open this up, it will open it up in Excel, and it's going out and getting that data for me. So I can go ahead and delete mass chunks of this information and then use the refresh tool, and it should go out and then it repopulates my spreadsheet. So if you're not using the Excel refreshable spreadsheets, it might be something to think about using, because we can now create them with our Smart List Designer tool. Business Analyzer. Business Analyzer was released, I believe, with GP 2010, and it originally was available on Windows devices, specifically a laptop or a computer, and it deployed out SQL Server reports. So it was a client install that's had on a laptop, and a user was given credentials into there and reports that they could see, and they could look at reports and they could refresh reports, and they never had to be a GP user in order to get that information. As they've moved along and enhanced this product, and it's in its 7th and 8th builds, they're now developing it to be cross-platform, so that now means it would work with Apple and Android devices. I can show it on my Windows phone. We can have it on an Android phone, or you can have it on an iPad, for example. It's also, they're building in capabilities to pull in management reporter content as well as Excel reports. So what it's doing is it's encapsulating reports and refreshable data for people that just need to consume those reports of data or see key performance indicators very quickly and in a graphical format. So it's a tool set that they are building on. They're asking people to continue using because they are very excited about what the capabilities are and how to push data out. So on the financials end, Dynamics has had an intercompany functionality for for general ledger transactions and accounts payable transactions for many versions. And it's always sort of lacked a few things of being able to do some inquiries back and forth between origination and destination company. It never felt completely tied together. And so they've made these inquiries tighter so that you can see from both sides of the entry where that they are an intercompany entry and what the originating entry was. And they've also added the ability to void an intercompany transaction if you allow it. So we'll go take a peek at, I'm not going to show the actual intercompany entry because that's not changed. What I do want to show is the inquiry screen that shows that we can get in back and forth and see from my originating company. So if I go into the journal entry inquiry screen and I type in an entry that I know is an intercompany, this is the originating, this company, the 2 company, is the originating company for this intercompany entry, so I know it's got an audit trail code of intercompany. But now I've got a button here at the bottom that will display to me where it went to. So now I know the destination company, and I know it quickly. We didn't have that good of a drill back in prior versions, so that's pretty exciting to get that. The customer payment terms enhancement. So based off of multiple customer requests, they said, I want to be able to create a payment term that's based off of a specific date, or I want to add months to the date for my terms code, or add dates to the transaction date, or put the payment terms for next month, or add a year. And so they took all of these requests and said, let's go ahead and create better payment terms. How can we make these better and more user-friendly for our end users, and more flexible for the customers that they're sending documents to? So the payment terms setup window, you now can create a due date based off of the transaction date of the document. You can add days to the due date. You can have additional discounting options. You can say the discount is next month or next year, or a lot of flexibility on how you're going to set up this term codes to help accommodate special needs. What they also added was a button up here that says calculate, that as you go in and create this terms code, a lot of times what we had to do is create the terms code and go, I think this is right, and then we had to go back to the transaction and put it in and say, yeah, that's what I wanted. With the calculate button, you can create your terms code, put in your parameters that you believe are correct, and then with the calculate button, you go in and say, if my document was this date, what would my due and discount date be? So it added some great, again, usability features, as well as just making it easier to get documents out to your customers or accept unique payment terms from your vendors. So let's take a peek of that window. All right, so we'll go into that payment term setup window. So this window doesn't, when you initially go in, it doesn't look all that new and fancy. But what it is you're taking a look at the due date, and you can calculate it from the transaction date. So when you put in a sales invoice, you could say today is the 22nd of April, and it could be due 30 days from the transaction date, if you said, or go always add 5 days to the transaction date before you figure out when the net due is. So we could say something like this, add 5, and it's really due in 30 days. And if we click on the calculate button, and we put in a date, we say a transaction date, and then hit calculate. Let's see if we can put something in. Sure, we can put something in. It'll go out and it will calculate out the days for us. So it's taking a look and saying, okay, when is this document really due? So I told it, in this case, look at my transaction date of 4/22, add 5 days to it, and then 30 days after that, the document is due. So the 5 days to the 22nd, and then it added 30 days and made the invoice due on 5/27. So if we're not thrilled with that's not the response, or that's not exactly what the customer or your vendor was asking for, we can start working with things to say, you know what, let's go into next month, 30 days. Or we can say go a year, or it's a specific date and month that this invoice is due. Because maybe you send out an invoice and say, hey, there's different reasons for how you would create payment terms. But we can go in and mess with and change and say, let's go and add 4 months to that. And then we can go ahead and calculate this information. And it will go and keep on moving and trying to recalculate everything for us as we go along. So adding that payment terms enhancement will allow us to be a little more flexible in how we bill our customers or accept invoices from our vendors. So I can't show you some of this because it's just so exciting to be able to see, but they added a fixed asset year-end closing report. So you're going to get a status report. What happened? Why did it happen? You'll be able to see the year-to-date depreciation, cost basis, accumulated depreciation. So the big thing is you actually get a report at the end of the year. Now on the distribution side, a couple of nice things that they added was our ability to edit the email for historical documents. So it does happen where you may use the Dynamics GP email functionality, the Word template, to email out a sales invoice, and you email it to somebody, the customer comes back and says, that person is no longer with the company, could you send that invoice to me again? And with the ability to edit the email on a posted sales transaction, you're able to resend the document. And that goes for payables remittance, sales orders, purchase orders, to be able to get that information out of the system and not have to manually email it or print it to PDF. We're able to change that. Now another personal favorite of mine, because I've spent time reconciling out received not invoice reports to the accrued purchases account in the general ledger. When you have purchase orders and people enter a purchase order and receive it, it makes a journal entry, and it also captures the information in a subledger report. Sometimes people don't go and do the invoice match process during the purchase order process. They'll just go to accounts payable transaction entry. What they've added is a warning, or the ability to have a warning that says, you know, you're entering an accounts payable transaction to a vendor that has an open PO. Do you want to take a look at this before we go to accounts payable and enter something, just to make sure that we keep things in sync? So let's take a look at what that screen looks like for a user. So if we go to purchasing, and we're just going to create a transaction entry, so that's my AP transaction entry. And we'll select our vendor, and we'll put our invoice date in, or invoice number. I'm going to put a dollar amount. So I can go along, put in my dollar amount, deal with my distributions. When I try and save this, it will come up with this warning that says, okay, you've got an open purchase order. Do you want to deal with it? And I can either click on Continue if I chose to, or I can click on the Go To button. And what that will do is open up a navigation list of all the open purchase orders for this vendor. Hopefully it will. It's slowly thinking about it. So in the background, if I minimize this, it would have, interesting, it did bring it up, but it should be bringing up all of our transactions for that particular vendor. So you could decide at this point if you wanted to deal with that AP as an AP transaction, or if you really should come in here, delete the transaction, and handle it through the purchase order invoice match. Okay, so this was another one of the big rocks. So Microsoft talks about is workflow. When GP 2013 R2 was released, it released the dexterity-based workflow engine. So in previous versions of Microsoft Dynamics, they had a SharePoint-based workflow engine that worked for purchase order requisitions or purchase orders, basically a handful of different objects and areas. When they released GP 2015 and they stopped supporting Business Portal, there were a good chunk of transactions that needed to have a new home and needed to have their own workflow engine. And so that's what they helped us with getting out the door. So with GP 2013 R2, they put in purchase order approval, and they also put in the purchase requisition approval, a payroll time card entry, and a project timesheet approval. So some of the features that were in Business Portal are now coming over to the Dynamics GP web client or rich client. With 2015, they added more for us. So what that allows us to do now is we can do a general ledger batch approval, a receivables batch approval, a vendor approval, an employee approval. We've got a whole bunch of employee self-service approval options, and now we can do project and expense approvals. So with dexterity-based workflow, it becomes easier, again, as an end user, given the right securities in the dynamic system, I can create a workflow for purchase orders or for an employee when we add a new employee or an employee wants to change their profile. And we can add those workflows and activate them and set up hierarchies of the approval trees quite easily within the system. Since it's dexterity-based, it's also easy for us to modify or create, through development, new objects as needed. So let's walk through workflow, because this is the fun stuff. Workflow can be a pretty straightforward setup. What needs to be done is we need to have web services, the web services runtime installed if you want to allow emails sent to users to have them approve or reject workflow objects. And then we go into our company setup and create new workflows. So when I talk about workflow maintenance, I'm going to go in and open up this window, and we're going to take a look at one of the payroll objects, and we can look at the profile approval. What we have with Dynamics GP 2015 is the ability for an employee to log into Dynamics, the rich client or the web client, with an employee self-service role, and they would be able to see self-service opportunities. So they could go in and change their profile or reprint their check or update their W-4, and when they submit that change into workflow, it can go to whomever you define in the workflow. So we set up the workflow maintenance. It's the objects that are available are sitting out here. So with the profile approval, we give it a name, and then we identify the states or the steps. So what that says is, okay, do we have any rules when an employee goes and updates their profile, who needs to approve this? Does it need to go through their manager, or does it go directly to the payroll group? So in my case, I've got the step of payroll approval that says it just always needs to be approved, and it is assigned to the GP admin SQL user. And so it will route itself to whomever that is. It can be multiple user IDs or a group ID on this particular step. And we can also set a time limit to how long can it sit in the GP admin's queue before it gets escalated up to the next person. We can apply a workflow calendar. So again, if you sent something on July 2nd at 5 p.m., we don't want to have something go into escalation mode on the 3rd when that's, in many cases, the standard holiday for the 4th of July. If we had Exchange set up right now, I could click on Send a Message. And what that means is when I submit the workflow change, it can send an email to the people that are responsible for approving it. And you can set up an email that identifies what fields will show on the email itself, as well as hyperlinks to accept, reject, or delegate, so that a user from an email can look at the email, look at the request, and click on an accept button and automatically push that request to the next step without ever logging into Dynamics GP. So what that means is that I can have users logging into GP as self-service making a request that sends an email out to somebody who's not a GP user but is a SQL user, they can approve the change, and then it sends it back to Dynamics GP so the next person can do their work. So you don't have to buy GP users or employee self-service users for people that not all people who have to approve or reject workflow objects. If I switch this radio button to do have a condition met for this, we will be able to have different fields that we can look at as far as if their last name is X or if their birth date is greater than something. We can then put in the logic that we want and say, for this step, if their birth date is greater than or equal to a specific date, then it needs to go to a specific group or a specific person. And then you can have another arm that goes along another step that says, okay, well, if their department is sales, then it needs to go someplace else. But you have the ability to have multiple steps, while in my case I only have one step. But you can have multiple and unlimited steps. So when you create these steps, you'll end up with, and I'm not trying to make people sick as I open up and close windows, you'll end up with multiple steps in this list if you choose to, and then you can identify other options. Can the approver delegate the task? So if I'm not going to be around or I'm on vacation, I may want to delegate all my tasks out for the next week. We may want to allow or disallow the originator to be the approver. And then we identify how we're going to have that task escalate. So we set up the basic workflow maintenance itself. You can have one active workflow within a company for each object. And then you can set up different email objects. So in this case, what you can do is you set up your message IDs. And so you can have a profile approval email. So if somebody submits a change to their profile and then the recipient who needs to approve it approves it, the originator would get an email to say, hey, it's been approved. And all of these emails are defined so that you can put in the fields that you want or additional wording that you want. You can display the comments that we put into this. We'll have an action list of accept, reject, or delegate. And then in the case of document types, workflow document types like the requisitions or the purchase orders, where they have lines attached to them, you could put in line information. So sometimes people in the email want to see what item am I buying, being requested, how much is it, what's the quantity. And you can build some more greater detail into the emails than we were able to do with a SharePoint-based workflow. Okay, so that's, to me, it feels very, very neat and straightforward. If I was my role is set up as the user that I'm logged into is it connected to an employee within the Dynamics GP system, and if I ask my home page to allow me to see time management information, I can see from this screen time cards if I was entering time card information, or I can go into the I need to section and do some employee self-service activities. So I could view my pay stubs. So from this screen, I can click on View My Pay Stubs, and I can see all of the pay stubs within the last 60 days that I've got out there. And by clicking on a button, I'm able to reprint my pay stub. Now, what we talked about is the fact that I want to view and update my profile. So in the View and Update My Profile, this is an employee self-service option. And what I've got is my employee ID, so it knows who I am and what I should be able to do. And if I go in here and I take that middle name off and I tab off of there, I can save this change. I can say, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and because of course now that I've got this all set up, oh, it's pending approval. I've got to go in and do approval here. I've got an open transaction here, but I can go in and make my change. I'd be able to submit it into. I'm going to go ahead and approve it. I'm going to try this again. So we're going to update my profile again. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to do this again. Oh, it's still waiting for the approval. I'd make my change as I would submit this into workflow. I can add a comment to why I'm asking for it, and I also have the ability to take a look at the workflow path of why is this failing or why is it succeeding, as far as what happened to this, who resubmitted it, who approved it, and it's telling me who delegated it, and it's saying it's pending, it's saying when it was done, it can say the next step. So it's giving you the tree or the life cycle of your particular transaction. So I'm going to go ahead and discard this. And if I go to my Human Resources and Payroll section and go to my Workflow Pending Approval, this should list out all of the workflow requests that have been sent to me that I should be able to approve or disapprove. So if I mark a particular transaction, I can view it, and I can see what they're asking for to see if there's something odd. So if I don't like it, I can reject it, or I could delegate it. Or if I think it's good and fine, I can go in and click on the Approve button and make sure that that goes and is approved. So hopefully the change would have gone through, and the employee would receive an email saying your change has been accepted. So we'll walk through that one more time. So an employee, because I'm doing this under the same user, an employee can log in through self-service and ask to do some simple things. I just want to view my direct deposit, or I want to view my pay stubs. Or I can say I want to view my profile and I may want to change it. So if I come in and I change something about my profile, I'm adding a middle name, I can click on the Submit button. And by clicking it to the Submit button, it now goes up the chain of command to say maybe it's the payroll manager or maybe it's my manager that will accept that change. When I click on that Submit button, I can put in my comment. And then my manager would get an email. And that manager could either accept it through the email, they could go to their home page to see all of their outstanding tasks, or they can go to the navigation pane and look at their outstanding workflow objects. And then if magic happens, I have a new object out here. And I can mark it, view it with my change, and approve it. All right. So we talked about employee self-service, and we showed you some of the functionality of workflow. And with R2, GP 2013 R2, they gave a handful of objects available to us. So they added purchase requisitions that can flow to purchase orders. So they had to have a requisition workflow. And then with GP 2015, they have added this whole list of workflow objects. And since this, they've also have a benefit self-service tool set. So before we could look at benefits, but now we have a benefit self-service that's available to us and with an engine that goes along with that. And we also have the ability for the manager to look at profiles or look at skills and make changes in certain situations. So again, with this employee self-service, what they're doing is they're moving the aspects of Business Portal into an employee self-service role within the Dynamics GP client or web client. And so if you were using Business Portal for any of these purposes, you had a Business Portal named user license, those licenses will transfer to GP 2015 as an employee self-service license, so you're not going to be requested to buy new licenses. But if these are features that you think you want to use and you never used Business Portal before, the employee self-service user license does have a cost attributed to it. But that's, as we look at transitioning you from whatever version to 2015, you may end up with some employee self-service user licenses. So some other ones that I did not show, I showed the profile one, but you can do project expense. So PDK is no longer a product of between Business Portal and Project Accounting. They have a time management. So you had time management with Business Portal. You can now enter time directly through the GP client. They are coming out with a, we'll go and look at, they have the employee profile workflow that we talked about. The employee can update their own skills and training and have it run through workflow. Again, all of this information was in Business Portal before. I can take a look at my benefits. I can reprint my pay stubs. I can change my, or request a change to my W-4s. And I could update and change my direct deposit information. Managers can see information and take a look at skills and training. And again, with the addition of payroll and human resources to the starter pack of GP 2013, many of these employee and human resources features now are really things that people can use because you can set up HR and not use payroll. The requisition feature with GP 2013 R2 has a workflow, so that replaces Business Portal. I have come to the end of my conversation. So those are the big rocks with Dynamics GP 2015. I think some of them are pretty exciting. Some of them are great user-friendly options. So I am open to questions or thoughts or comments.
Well, awesome. Thank you for the great material, Lorna. We did have a couple questions that come in, so here's the first. Do payment terms allow us to split an invoice into multiple payments like a payment plan?
No, payment terms do not do that. You could look at, and I'm wondering perhaps if we've looked at scheduled payments for this request. And that's functionality that you'd also have.
Okay.
And then that would take an invoice that could be split into multiple lumps.
Okay. So another one that came in is, will the workflow you show replace third-party document imaging or workflow software like MetaViewer?
No. Very good question. So MetaViewer is document imaging. And so you can scan in your document, and it does the indexing so that people outside of GP can approve it, and then you can drill back from an invoice to that scanned image. That's not what our workflow is doing, and in current plans with Microsoft are not going to that high level OCR type of document imaging with Dynamics GP. You can certainly attach the document, a scanned image of the document, to a payables transaction, but it's not doing the indexing, and it's not doing where you can see the scanned image outside of the system easily. So if you have high-end needs where MetaViewer would come into play, we'd still be looking at those for approval systems. But if you have employee-type needs where you just need to change a profile quickly, this workflow engine is going to do a lovely job.
Okay. Another one was, will 2015 handle IRS forms 1094 and 1095?
Those are the ACA reports, I believe. Is that correct? To whomever asked that one? I believe those are the. I believe so. All right, whoever.
Yes, that was correct.
Yeah, they are. I don't have the service pack on here, but the answer is yes. It will print those forms.
Okay.
And as far as when we get into the ACA type of conversations, Microsoft had a mini hotfix that came out with some corrections to how they're capturing ACA data. They are doing the W-2 forms that we mentioned, as well as they are building on more ideas and thoughts on how to get some of the standard reports out.
Okay, and then I actually got a follow-up to the payment terms question. So they're currently running reoccurring contract module from Encore. They're wondering if there's any way in the new version of GP to set up a payment plan for an invoice instead of using the contract module.
It's not as so it's not as elegant as what you've got in with the Encore module. So we've got, now I'm put on the spot and I can't find that. We've got an opportunity here to do a scheduled payment now. It's a recurring billing. No, not really. I mean, because your receivables transactions can be in a recurring batch, but sales orders have to be orders that are repeating. So the answer is maybe, but you probably bought Encore for a reason. I mean, I'd love to hear more about it, but it's hard to say for sure.
Okay. Are there any modifications relating to attaching documents to the files?
So I'm assuming that is when you are creating, for example, a transaction, an AP transaction entry, and you want to attach a document. This document attach feature, so we're in a payables transaction entry. If you click on the attach paperclip, this is replacing the Olay link in past, and so we can certainly attach multiple and unlimited documents. So if I go ahead and copy that in, I can pull in a document onto this transaction. If it comes in for us. Okay, so it pulls in my transaction, and this will travel from the unposted invoice to the posted invoice. So we'd always have drill back functionality. They do have the ability that if we had a printer hooked up here, we could scan in the invoice and have it attach itself to this transaction as well. So it's not sophisticated document management, but it can attach that scanned image into this document management. So there's nothing really grander than what they had with GP 2013 R2.
Okay, and I think this one is on the same lines. I'm not sure if you touched on this, but are document attachments viewable outside of GP?
Not at this point. I was going to play with it a little bit to see, because it stores it into a SQL table as a blob, I believe, and so I think that's going to be harder to render it outside of the system.
Okay.
And that's where the beauty of our meta viewers come into play.
We have a few more questions left here. So in workflow, is the requested change highlighted in any manner?
No. No. So when we went into that profile, you had to really look at it to say what's the difference here.
Okay. So then, is there a full feature set for mobile, i.e. iPhone or Android, or is it limited functionality? In other words, will users be able to edit time, etc. on their phone?
Edit time, so what you're asking, I believe, is if I come into the time management screen and I say I want to enter time for a pay period, can I do that on a mobile phone? I can't do it today. There will be apps released periodically and more aggressively than service packs within Dynamics GP. The next app they're going to release is the PTO app, which will allow a user to request PTO and have that go to their manager. Time entry is on the docket so that that you can get it on a mobile device, so somebody can have an app to enter time entry. So the answer is not today, but it's coming.
Okay. Are there financial reports customizable? Could it replace FRX?
Management Reporter is the tool that it has or should be replacing FRX, and I don't have that. And so that was one of the options that I showed you, is to be able to hook Management Reporter reports within Dynamics GP and navigation lists. So in this case, the reports that are displaying in this list have been created through the Management Reporter tool, and that is the tool that replaces FRX.
Okay, and this could also have been answered right there, but does FRX still work with GP 2015?
Not officially.
Okay.
I think you can make it work, but it's not going to be supported.
Will all of the FRX reports transfer to Management Reporter?
There is a migration tool that can move FRX reports to Management Reporter. Over the last 2 years, that tool has been used, that it has gotten stronger, so it's transferring data more successfully. There's always a little cleanup work that happens when you migrate from FRX to Management Reporter, but the answer is there's a tool, and it does a pretty good job.
Awesome. So we have the last couple here. So has there been any updates to ACH addenda, and I think I'm pronouncing that correctly, functionality?
With GP 2013, they did some default NACHA profiles in the ACH setups. I think we need to know a little bit more about what they're specifically looking for before I can answer that completely.
Okay, we'll let them do a little follow-up. The last question that we actually have right here is, will 2015 have reports for ACA requirements?
They're working on them. So we talked about the couple of 1099 reports that are available when you're completely service packed that are available today. They are capturing the fields, the ACA requirement fields in the healthcare benefits in human resources, but standard reports, they are still working those through, and they haven't been released yet.
Well, that looks like all the questions that have come in so far. So with that, I just want to thank you for the great presentation, Lorna. If there's no additional questions, I'd like to thank you all for attending the presentation today. Please feel free to reach out to your account executive, account manager, or myself if you'd like to find out any more information about anything you heard during today's presentation. On behalf of everyone at Interdyne BMI, we just want to thank you for your attendance and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.